Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's retro review is Cthulhu Dark Ages for Call of Cthulhu 5th edition by Chaosium. Okay, first a bit of history. Originally released in 2004, Cthulhu Dark Ages is a 176-page softback book that encompasses the setting and rules for creating scenarios based in the era of the Dark Ages, or around 1000 AD. Okay, to the cover. Here we have a pretty decent, perhaps appropriately dark piece by Francois Launay. Right, to the inside. Here we are first greeted by the Latin phrase, quod in aeternum cubit mortem non est, et seculus miris actus etiam mors perierit, which it then claims to say the famous Lovecraft phrase, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. However, quickly running the phrase through Google Translate produced, the dead do not lie there forever and even death is lost forever amazing. My Latin isn't up to much, so I'm not sure which one is correct. After this we have the usual array of acknowledgments and thank yous, and then we move on to the introduction. Here it lays out what the book intends. It informs us that it covers the period of 950 to 1050 AD and that it is essentially a self-contained game. It gives us some hints on playing in the Dark Ages, a time of both absolute oppression and wild impunity, where everyone serves somebody and status is everything, a time of rapid change. It gives us notes on what players need to know in order to understand the era, including a section on ruling by fear, a selection of techniques to get the best out of the game. The part that follows this is called the game system. Here it covers perhaps unnecessarily basics such as which dice to roll and then the Call of Cthulhu stats and what they translate to in game. This is followed by a list of game terms and the rules on creating an investigator, which includes lists of names from the period. We then move on to occupations. Here it lists the ones you would probably expect to see in a Dark Ages game, such as beggars, clerics, monks, nuns and pilgrims, but it also stresses that some of the classes are magic using, these being the healer, the hermit, the heretic, an exorcist and a priest. This leads into a list of skills that are normal to the Call of Cthulhu system, but adds some others such as other kingdoms and own kingdom, and replaces credit rating with a new skill called status, which is a measure of personal reputation and rank. Next are lots of basic rules such as movement, exposure and effective fire and light, and then it moves on to actions and experience rewards. It then gives some Dark Age poisons which are quite handy, and also has, as you might expect, rules for injuries, drowning and disease, including another table of Dark Age diseases. What follows covers hand-to-hand combat in all the methods that you would expect at the time, and includes fairly decent weapons tables and the rules for war engines. It then moves on to Sanity and gives a page on the various vessels of the period, as well as the equipment you would expect to be able to obtain. After this is the fairly oddly named chapter called Utilities. Here, it covers the likes of the huge influence that religion of the time had, including decent notes on monks, farmers, warlords and princes. It goes into how cities operated and even touches upon the technology of the period. After this, we have a quick tour of the world. Here, it discusses the state of the known Dark Ages world, touching upon which cities and countries were powerful and to what extent, and it stretches from the Arab world to Russia and the Scandinavian kingdoms, and includes a map. After this we have a Dark Ages glossary which includes many interesting words and turns of phrase that were normal at the time, and this is followed by a selection of important events that occurred in this 100-year time period. After this is a list of natural disasters and occult events. We then have a who's who which has God at the top of the pile, followed by a list of various bishops, philosophers and scholars, as well as detailing various kings and emperors of the period. After this we have a chapter called the Cthulhu Mythos. Here it gives a fairly well written summary of the differences between outer gods, elder gods, other gods and great old ones, and this includes some discussion on servitor races and independent races. After this is a section called the Old Grimoire. Here it gives a breakdown of magic in the Dark Ages and gives the rules for learning and casting spells, as well as ritual and artifact usage. This is followed by a selection of spells, and it seems that sadly, in an attempt to give the setting a Dark Ages flavour, many of the conventions of Call of Cthulhu magic seem to have been sidestepped, as a fair few of the spells have 0 sand cost to use, and there's even a healing spell, although this is based more around short-term care. It gives some information on the plane of Limbo and the Sixth Sense, and then details some mythos tomes. As you would expect, we have the Al-Azif present and correct, as well as many others you would expect, and also included is the first book that I've seen in the game that gives more Cthulhu Mythos points than the Necronomicon, the Tupsamati, a set of Mesopotamian tablets said to belong to the Babylonian serpent Tiamat. Also included are a small selection of non-mythos occult tomes. After this we have a bestiary. This touches upon things like angels, but includes the likes of basilisks, and sadly even has rules for unicorns. It details a selection of mythos creatures that are actually quite nicely illustrated, and also includes discussion on the likes of giants and goblins, and has some new threats such as dark ones and nameless mist. It talks about spirits and limbo creatures, and it touches upon things like spirit attacks and possession, as well as the various different types of spirits, and the flesh-devouring dolls, the old ones, and the tomb herd. After this it goes into the deities of the mythos, which includes Bugshash, Lilith, and Tawil At-Uma, an avatar of Yog-Sothoth. This is followed by the scenario we get with a book called The Tomb. At 45 pages long, including handouts, it's a fairly hefty portion of the book. I'm not going to spoil it here, but it does involve a fair amount of investigating and interaction, and in some ways doesn't feel that different to a lot of other Call of Cthulhu scenarios. At the back, we have a character sheet and an index. Cthulhu Dark Ages, for me, was a huge missed opportunity. It's coined as a game unto itself, but it really didn't need to be. It feels incredibly padded out with things that are not really required for those that own the BRP or Call of Cthulhu systems. These basic rules take up huge swathes of space that could have been filled with descriptions of places, people and horrors that the book really needs in order to make it playable in any long-term fashion. I also take issue with the massive overuse of the word Occident. For those in the dark, Occident essentially means the countries of the West, and it is used to the point of exhaustion throughout without ever bothering to explain what it means. The art throughout the book ranges from okay to quite superb, and the layout and general production values are what you would expect from Chaosium. My biggest issue is that it feels like it wasn't put to the sword by an editor willing to chop out the large passages of repeated material. If this had been a supplement that required you to own the Call of Cthulhu rules, it would have probably been 20 pages shorter, which could have been used for more interesting things. Also, unicorns have no business being in Call of Cthulhu unless they are pulling Nodens as chariot. I give Call of Cthulhu Dark Ages a 5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my other reviews. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I've put some links below. Lastly, if you enjoy what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon. Bud out.